passed away in 2014, but Susan to this day is still buying pieces of fashion. She's in her 80s and I'll get texts from her at 1 o'clock in the morning. Did you see this dress at Augusta Auctions? Let's go halves on it. I need to add it to the collection. So the museum is, and the community really is at a great benefit to have someone like Susan as their benefactress, actively interested in, and to be vulgar, throwing money at the goal of expanding that collection. The newest curator who's replacing me at the museum, her name is Cassidy Pearson. She's coming from the Fenimore Farm Museum in Cooperstown, where I happened to be earlier this week for the New York State Preservation Conference. So it's a small world. We all kind of know each other. In upstate New York is really we are at an advantage with how many people are interested in textiles and fashion, historic textiles and fashion. So many, I would say almost all historical societies have some clothing within their collection. Some of them are unsure what to do with them. Other historical societies take advantage of that collection like we have here and put them on display. So I would say, starting out, like what draws most people to historic textiles, particularly fashion, is the fact that this is one of the most intimate forms of material culture. These are objects that were made to represent an internal identity in an external visual way to go about the world. They are worn against the human body, so they absorb and are imbued, literally and figuratively, with an essence of a person who has been dead for many, many years, an essence of the past that you cannot replicate in a museum display or a museum label or a text description. There are many times where I will encounter a garment, a dress, a jacket, and you'll smell the perfume that someone wore who's been dead for 200 years. There are times when you might smell the BO of someone who has been dead for many years, and that essence of their body, that chemistry of their biology lives on in the clothing. Now, many museums and historical societies, at the end of the day, what really drives our ability to preserve and display and handle and care for objects, unfortunately, is money and funding. So there is a wide array of circumstances that dictates how we are all able to display clothing and care for it. But despite that variety of circumstance, what holds true across all of those different circumstances are the facts of textiles themselves. And arming yourselves with this information will help all of us preserve this most intimate form of material culture for hundreds of years in the future. Because wool in a very enriched museum is gonna behave the same as wool in a museum that has no money and no donors and no volunteers at all. So knowing the behavior of these textiles is really gonna help us preserve that physical history for the future. So in vintage textiles, I would say anywhere from like 1930 and backward, you're gonna be working with what I call the big four. So that is cotton, linen, wool, and silk. You'll have some leather thrown in there, some metal elements, sometimes even fur in there. But it's really those big four textiles that you will be working with and handling, and they're relatively simple to identify once you really see and handle these materials. So for many years, the industry standard was to handle these materials with gloved hands, usually cotton gloved hands. So what happens when you put on gloves? You lose a bit of your textile sense. So when you're handling materials with gloves, you may be damaging them without feeling that you're damaging them because you have those thick gloves on. So now the modern standard is to handle textiles with bare hands that have been freshly washed. You can also use those really tight latex or nitrile gloves, and you lose much less sense of your touch than those white cotton gloves. The white cotton gloves have a texture to them. They're fabric. So you can snag and rough and abrade that textile without knowing that you are doing so. So I always recommend bare, freshly washed hands or clean hands with nitrile or really tight latex gloves on them when you're handling them. Yes?
What about hand sanitizer that is well dried? Is that acceptable as a way to remove oil from the skin?
It's not gonna, hand sanitizer doesn't really like remove anything from the hand. It kills bacteria. So alcohol can cut through oil a bit, but not as well as like palm olive or dish soap. So I would say just wash your hands because you're breaking down the oil, and the rinse removes it from your hand totally. And you can wash your hands, and that's going to be good for like an hour. So it's not like you touch one thing, I gotta wash my hands, touch something else, I gotta wash my hands. You have raw hands and you're bleeding on the fabric by the end of the afternoon. I'd say like once an hour, or like after touching something dirty, or certainly like food, you'll want to wash your hands. So working with those big four, I'm gonna give you some of the behaviors of those textiles. So the textiles that seem to age the best tend to be cotton and linen, followed by wool and then silks. Cotton and linen you can wash by hand in a basin. I would not recommend putting anything in a machine washer, certainly not a machine dryer. But you can absolutely immerse linen and cotton into lukewarm water with an archival detergent. Usually the detergent people use in vintage and antique textiles is a white paste called Orvis, O-R-V-U-S. It's a very, very mild detergent. It comes in a big old canister, and it's a thick paste. So you can take a little like a tiny little handful out, put it in the water, dissolve it, and then immerse cotton and linen into that detergent, and then you can rinse it out. It's so mild that it has dual uses, both in textile, cleaning and museum work, and washing horses. So I will say Susan Greene of the Susan Greene Costume Collection uses Orvis to shampoo her hair, she has told me. So it is a very mild detergent that most museums will use for linen and cotton textiles. It is color safe, so it's not going to bleach out any dyes. If the dye in the textile happens to be a fugitive dye, it's going to leach out regardless of what detergent you use. So I always recommend test on the inside of the garment somewhere and use lukewarm water. Never use hot water, because that will leach out dye lots from your textiles more often. Yes?
What is a fugitive dye?
A fugitive dye is a dye that is not affixed to a textile, so that when you wash it or even expose it to sunlight over a period of time, it will leach out of the fabric. So if you put, let's say, usually fugitive dyes are things like blacks, some purples, and organic non-arsenic based green dyes from the early half of the 19th century or the latter half of the 18th century. And so when you put them in hot water, or soapy water that isn't an archival detergent, you're going to see it in the basin of water. You're going to see that color leach out right into the water and go right down the drain. Now, will you ruin an object if you do that? No, you're not going to affect its structural integrity, but you lost its color, its vibrance. So we want, these are all measures that we can practice to avoid leaching out those colors. Yeah, I'm sorry, I thought you raised your hand. Yes?
Just a good general question. Are there resources or websites that you would recommend that if you have a question, because you don't remember everything, and things come up, that are really good ones to go to?
I would say the American Museum Association has some overarching broad rules. I would also say for textiles and fashion advice in particular, Augusta Auctions. They are an auction house, but they are, Augusta Auctions is like the creme de la creme in historic textiles and fashion, and anyone who has worked at like the Met or the V&A or LACMA, they tend to, in their retirement, move to Augusta Auction and become someone who dates objects and can give an appraisal on that object. So on their website, it has all of that professional contact information, and those people are a wealth of information, and they are dying to spread that information. So these, from my experience at least, textile professionals are people, as you probably can glean now, who will talk your ear off about that passion. So reach out to them. It may take some time, but that they are willing to give you that information. I would also say some seminal textile books. One of them would be Wearable Prints, 1760 to 1860 by Susan Greene herself. This is a Bible of printed textiles, and it reads, anyone, an academic, learned academic in grad school could read it, or someone who's never read or knows anything about historic fashion could read it. It's easy to read, and it's enjoyable. It has a little bit of her humor in there.
Wearable, what was the title?
Wearable Prints.
Okay.
Like a printed fabric, PRINTS.
1760 to 1860.
Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
It's a textile Bible. So if you buy that, I would recommend you buy it from Cornell rather than Amazon. Amazon jacks up the price to about $120. Whereas Cornell, it's about $80, which is still, an expensive book, but once you have it, you'll clutch it to your bosom. It is a Bible in the textile world. Now, some trends with cotton and linen that you will see is earlier items, 18th century, early 19th century, tend to be made of linen. Linen is the first layer we're putting against our skin. Our underwear is made out of that, our petticoats, chemises, men's shirts. That fabric that's right against the naked body, that is going to be made of linen because you can wash it over and over again. That linen is protecting your dress, your wool jacket, your waistcoat, your breeches from your body. So you can't really wash or immerse a silk dress or a wool peacoat or a silk brocade waistcoat. You can kind of spot clean it with potato vodka or use a powder and rub it into an oil stain. The powder sucks out the oil, and then you beat out that powder from the textile. But you can't really immerse the wool and silk in water like that. It's gonna warp the fabric or create a tide line when it dries. So our underwear historically has always been made of a fabric that can be washed over and over again. And for hundreds of years, if not thousands, that textile, that fiber was linen. Now in America, in North America in the 19th century, the cotton production industry displaces linen, and we are outsourcing our cotton to England, to be processed in England and sent back to us. Egypt starts creating cotton in the mid-19th century, and that's where we get this idea of Egyptian cotton being finer than American cotton. And cotton is easier to process than linen is. So cotton, especially if you have, if you enslave thousands of people to do it for you for free. So it very quickly displaces linen across the Western world as the number one washable, durable fabric to wear and make all of our underwear out of. So I would say that if you're looking at two chemises, and one is linen and one is cotton, the cotton one is younger than the linen chemise is. Then again, there are wealthy people across the 19th century who just prefer the linen and have the money to procure it. So it's not a hard and fast rule, but generally cotton displaces linen by like 1825, 1830, certainly. You can wash and immerse and iron cotton and linen by hand. One thing I would say is whenever you get a new object into your collection, you want to quarantine it. You want to make sure it doesn't have any little thing living inside that's going to hatch and eat the rest of your collection. So if you have an industrialist endowment in your museum, you may use some of that endowment to buy a liquid nitrogen chamber that makes it super cold inside. You can put all your objects in there and kill everything. Most places don't have that. Genesee Country Village Museum does not have that. The MAG does not have that. No one in Rochester has that. I know that the Met in New York City certainly has something like that. So what any museum up here can do instead is they can use a normal freezer to freeze the clothing. So if it's cotton or linen, you can avoid that. You can wash it by hand. You can dry it flat. You don't want to hang anything wet ever, because when you wet textiles, just like when we wet our hair, it makes that fiber takes on some of the water. It becomes weaker. It loses some of its tensile strength. So if you hang something soaked in water, the weight of that could warp it, if not break the fibers altogether. So I recommend always, if you have something soaking wet, take an old bath towel flat, lay it on the bath towel, and then roll it up. You don't want to wring it or squeeze it too hard, but the rolling up will remove a lot of that fabric, or a lot of that water from the fabric, And as it dries a little bit more, then you can hang it up. You can even hang it in the sun to naturally, I would not use the word bleach out the fabric, but whiten the fabric a bit. And then you can iron that with a pressing cloth, and you're good. It's safe to go in that collection. Other textiles like wool and silk that you cannot immerse in water, those are the textiles that you will want to freeze before moving them with the other objects in your collection. And it's very simple. You will carefully put them into a clear chamber. So if you don't have a huge chest freezer where you can put in clear plastic tote bins, put it in a clear garbage bag. Seal up, double knot the garbage bag, put it into a freezer for a week. Then take it out of the freezer, keep it sealed in the bag, do not open the bag, let it warm up for 3 days tops. Anything that is living inside, like moths or little beetles or worms or anything, mites, what have you, will think it's springtime, I need to hatch, this winter is done. And they will hatch inside of that bag. And if there's anything living in there, you'll see it through that clear container. Then after about 3 days, you're gonna put it right back into the cold and kill off anything for about a week. If you are really worried, you might wanna do that 2 or 3 times. But at the end of one freeze, thaw, freeze cycle, most things will be dead. And you can sort of lift up the bag and peer inside, see if anything has precipitated out of the textile, or if there's any sediment collecting at the bottom, or even like casings of things. Then you can take it out of the bag, and you're gonna want to conduct a really thorough visual and physical examination. So, turn up the collar and look under collars. And same with cuffs, or the hem of skirts, or in the underarm area. And make sure that there's nothing living in there, or the cocoon of anything. You can take an archival vacuum, or if you don't have the budget for an archival vacuum, a normal vacuum with a brush tip that you have not used on the floor, or if it has been used on the floor, wash it first. And take like a screen, like a fabric window screen, place it over the object and vacuum above the screen. So it will remove any loose sediment, but you're not gonna accidentally suck the fabric up into the tube and have to pull it out, which it could damage or break or shatter that fabric. That screen is going to protect you.
That's a good idea.
And then once that is done, and in your examination, you're also gonna see is this object structurally sound? Is it shattering at the shoulder or in the underarm, around the neckline? Are there shatters in the skirt? Is it ripping or torn? And that is going to tell you how you store your object. If it's structurally sound enough to hang, then hang it. That is going to take up the least amount of space. Real estate, as I'm sure you know, in any historical site, whether it's out in your display exhibition area or in your storage area, that is one of the biggest struggles, is keeping a lot of stuff in a very limited space. So hanging up clothing on a rack is the most space efficient way of storing a lot of objects. If it is too fragile to hang, then you have to sacrifice some space and store it horizontally in an archival box. An archival box is any cardboard box that is acid free and doesn't have plastic components that will off gas over decades of time. Wood also off gases. Wood is naturally acidic. So if you have new fresh wooden containers, they could have some sort of chemical treatment on them. They could have, again, the natural acid of the wood. All of that is off-gassing off of new, fresh wooden furniture, and it's going to affect the clothing that you have inside. It affects all textiles, silk, wool, linen, and cotton, but it's gonna hurt wool and silk the most, which tend to be the finer fabrics, that finer out clothing, non-underwear clothing tends to be made of in the 19th century. So if you have an old cedar box, or even like an Empire, American Empire piece of furniture like this, it's old. It has had hundreds of years, like 150 years to off gas. Probably is wood the best way to store things? No, but it's not, something like that is not going to hurt the object the way a brand new a piece of wooden furniture you get from the store, or those wooden furniture pieces from like IKEA or Walmart. Those have all sorts of chemicals and like wood pulp in them. It's not even real wood. So all of that is off-gassing. Now, if you have something at your house right now and it's in a drawer or in a plastic bin and it's been there for like 10 years, like 10 years isn't gonna do that much damage. Like we're talking decades of time. What will do damage and do damage quickly is water, on objects that are not supposed to get wet, sunlight, and chemicals. And that's pretty easy to avoid. Or like rapid changes in temperature and humidity. Particularly the humidity can hurt clothing. Or sustained high humidity. There are mold and fungus spores just all over everything and in the air naturally. So if you create an ideal environment for those spores to go onto an object and sort of activate, clothing is going to be one of those objects. There are many folds in clothing. It can hold humidity and moisture more than a wooden or metal surface or even a plastic surface. So it's going to fall onto that clothing and affect it. So, you know, knock on wood, if you were to have a flood, you want to dry those materials as quickly as possible to avoid any mold growth. You really, AMA, the American Museum Association, recommends drying textiles and paper first in the event of a flood, because you have like a 48-hour window before mold will start to grow. And once mold grows, it stains and chemically changes that object, and you can't revert it back after that has taken hold of the fabric. You can remove the mold, you can neutralize it and kill it, but it's probably going to create a stain or a mark or a mar, or certainly a weak spot in that textile. Now, wool and silk, let's say you've quarantined them, you've removed anything alive inside, you've done the vacuum treatment to remove debris, and now you find out that it can hang because it's structurally sound. How do we hang these objects? On a hanger. So what kind of hanger are we using? Especially with vintage textiles, if you use a modern hanger, it may fit. It may be too wide or it may be too short for the shoulder line. This is a time in the 19th century and certainly the 18th century when every clothing piece is made what we would call custom or bespoke for that person's body. And that it's across society. If you are the wealthiest of the wealthy or even an indigent or an enslaved person, you are brought to a tailor or a dressmaker and they cut that fabric to your body. It's really the quality of fabric and the quantity of yardage and the number of pieces of clothing you have that is determined by your level in society. But everyone is going to a person who cuts the fabric against their body. It's really the latter end of the 19th and then to the 20th when clothing is mass produced, when there are patterns that are published that people can cut their own clothing to they attempt to make it like a scientific formula where like if you follow this pattern it's going to fit your body perfectly and here's like a size range. That happens much later. So because of that, like modern mannequins, modern hangers don't quite fit these clothing pieces as well as they could. And if you put something, as we all know, inside of a piece of fabric or a garment that doesn't fit it, you're going to warp that fabric after a while. Especially when things are hanging, if there's any part on a textile across the board, men, women, and children, that's going to affect it, it's the width of that hanger in the shoulder line. Now the shoulder line on clothing changes across the decade. It could be like right at the shoulder point, the way shoulders are built today. It could be down into the arm, which was particularly popular from like 1830 to 1868, I would say until the late 60s. So you want to change the width of your hanger. And you can do that as easily as taking a plastic hanger. PVC is usually not all plastic off-gasses, but PVC tends to off-gas the least, which is why it's often used in piping because that is off-gassing into the water we're drinking. So you can take a PVC hanger that you can buy at like the dollar store and you can either cut it off or like chisel it off. Do it outside because that piece is going to go flying and you don't want it to hit an object or blind someone. That has happened before in the back room at when we're making hangers. And you're going to want to pad out that hanger. Now you can use all sorts of materials, archival materials, to pad out a hanger, and they all are pretty cheap or cost. None of them are too expensive. So one of those materials, as we see here, can be pool noodles. They do not off-gas, the color does not transfer, they are cheap, and they can be cut into all shapes. And they have a hole running through them, so you can pop them right onto the edges of the hanger themselves. You really want that hanger to end or have a rounded end right when the shoulder is falling. So, and that will again be determined by where you're setting the shoulder into that arm side, that opening around the arm. So you can use something very cheap like pool noodles. We use them. RMSC uses them. Every museum I've gone to that has a storage that has the opportunity to store clothing uses pool noodles. We would carve them, the solid pool noodles, into arms and legs when we display the clothing. Because as I'm sure you have found out, modern mannequins they are too big for 19th century clothing. And modern mannequins are pretty darn expensive. They're about like $350 per torso. So like you're not getting the head and the arms and the legs, it's like just the torso for $350. And then you have to practically destroy the thing by carving into it to make it even fit a garment. And because every decade there's a new silhouette, you're like, I spent a big money and then I carved half of it away and it's only gonna fit this one decade within our collection. So it's tough to display textiles. it is one of the more difficult objects to display. And because the human eye naturally picks up on proportions of people, if you're like so much as a ½ inch off on the length of an arm or a leg, it looks wonky to the museum visitor. And then it's not the best experience that they enjoy. So using cheap materials that are carvable and easily accessible like pool noodles is going to save you a lot of time both in the storage department and the exhibition department. Now, let's say you don't want to use pool noodles. There are other materials that are cheap that you can use. One of them is this material here called medical stockinette. You can buy it at CVS. It's essentially it's just a knit tube of cotton that doctors put over casts. You can get really, really tight, elastic medical stockinette that is sometimes made into like compression stockings for edema. You can get it in all sorts of widths. And the museum, uses that to cover hangers that have cotton batting inside of them to pad out the hanger, or pool noodles, or as we see here, with this bonnet from 1816's collection. It's been used to create the neck and the head mold for this bonnet here, which dates from about 1860. So I'm actually going to take the bonnet off carefully, and you can see that I've rolled up the ribbons on this piece of ethafoam so they're not hanging free. If you have ribbons hanging free in a display or in storage and it's never being moved, it's fine. But if you're moving that object around quite frequently, you'll want to roll up those ribbons so they just don't get tattered. So I'm actually going to pass this around. You're going to feel several materials. First of all, the board is an acid-free board. It usually comes in that pale bluish gray, French gray, dove gray color. And it is that color because when you put a blue next to an antique white, it will brighten that white. Bluing is what that's called. And for thousands of years, we've blued clothing in the laundry process to make that white brighter. That's why like many modern clothing detergents are blue. That's why your toothpaste has that blue stripe in it. It's dyeing that object blue just a tiny, tiny bit to make the white appear brighter. So most, yes?
Well, if you're exhibiting a dress
Yes.
from the late 1800s, and obviously you see a lot of people try to use mannequins, but what do you use? What would you recommend?
If you have the budget, I would buy one mannequin of like a heavy foam, and then you can carve it with a blade into the exact shape you want. You can almost create like a blank. And then you can cast from that blank with archival buckram a series of mannequins. So you buy one mannequin, a roll of buckram that you cut into strips. Buckram, B-U-C-K-R-A-M. It looks like material that they make casts out of. Thank you so much. It's almost like not quite a netting because it's denser than netting, but it has, it's caked with a stiffening agent, and you activate it in warm water and it gets very soft. You wrap it around the object in little strips, just like a cast or like paper mache or plaster of Paris, and it hardens very, very, very hard. And you can cast mannequins from that blank. So you can buy one mannequin, carve it down to the shape you need, and then cast off of it a series of mannequins. And then in that series of buckram mannequins, you can use wool or cotton or even poly batting or pool noodles or other archival foams to build up the shape. Because again, not every body is the same, and not every piece of fabric or textile is the same, so you can use a blank and build out within that time period to fill out a large array of textiles and clothing. And that's going to save you hundreds, if not thousands of dollars in the process. That's what we would do at Genesee Country Village Museum. We would cast from a blank mannequin and put it on a pole, essentially like a T inside, so there's a pole going horizontally and one going down, and we would put that through a hole in the floor or just a good old wood block that has a hole in it, and you can put that on and then build out from there. So we are not displaying, we're not using our actual cage crinolines under a crinoline dress. So I'm building out the dress with Tyvek. You can go buy a roll of Tyvek at Lowe's or any hardware store. Tyvek, when you buy it in a roll, tends to be very thick and firm, so I can cut that out into a big rectangle and then pleat it and pin it around that foam mat or buckram mannequin, and it's gonna hold that skirt out.
So some of the things you're describing, because I'm not familiar with this, would that be in the book, Textile World?
The printed cotton or the wearable prints, some of that will be in there. Wearable prints is really going to give you more a basis of understanding of the behavior of textiles and what textiles are being used across different eras. So that's really going to help you date objects when they come into your collection, or if they're already in your collection. It's going to help you know, oh, this orange, I should and should not do this to it, or this green looks awfully like an arsenic green. Perhaps I should always wear gloves and a mask when I'm moving this textile around.
So wearable prints won't kind of give you those little tips on building your own mannequin?
No, but AMA's website will, the American Museum Association. They have mount making videos and tutorials. They have hanger making tutorials and industry standards for storage and display. So that will absolutely give you that more practical, applied knowledge, whereas wearable prints is going to give you that historical basis of understanding the textiles.
I mean, because our particular historical society, we don't have a lot of textiles.
Yeah.
So.
Well, that you can use that to your advantage, because now you have a smaller collection that is much more manageable, and you can use that as a starting point to build onto. And when you have a small manageable collection, you have the advantage of being able to preserve it really, really well. And also develop your eye too. It's kind of like people who who identify counterfeit money. If you're only working with the real thing the whole time, when a costume or a counterfeit reproduction presents itself, you will instantly know it is not the real thing. Yes.
One of the things, we have a couple of dressmaker
Forms.
that were donated. I attended, I might have been one of your workshops. You know, stores going out of business and they're getting rid of their supplies, and they have mannequins, sometimes they have them.
Yeah.
Are you worried at all about gases and things from there?
I would not recommend using like a hard, hollow mannequin. Like when JCPenney was going out of business a few years ago, I went to all of them and was like, where are your mannequins? Can I see them? And they were all those hard, like hollow plastic mannequins. So like I couldn't carve into them because it's not foam. I could not change the size at all. And they don't yield. Plastic does not yield. Whereas foam, if I'm sort of, I will not use the word forcing because I don't force anything into fabric, but you know, foam can yield a bit. You can crunch it and compress it, and then it will expand and fill a shape. Hard plastic and metal and wood will not do that. So if you come across like hard mannequins, probably not the best thing, and you might have, it's going to take up space in your building rather than display objects. But those hard foam mannequins, if you can find them, scoop them up as fast as you can. It may be foam that off gases, so you can carve it into the shape you need and then use that as the blank to make buckram mannequins from. Or once in a while you'll find some young thin thing that can eat anything they want and stay a tiny little size. Go to that person and say, can I cast a mannequin off of you? Have them put on like a tight spandex shirt, and you will take duct tape, and probably like 2 rolls of duct tape, and you will literally duct tape all the way, like from hip to shoulder or even neckline. And then you will cut up the back right through that shirt and you'll have a cast form, and you can use buckram on that form to cast off if you don't have a mannequin, but you know some skinny person. So that can work too, and we have absolutely done that.
Really know it's not gonna think that you're totally weird.
Yes, and
Yeah,
you
to know
you
that
cut the
person.
shirt off of them in the end, so like an element of like privacy is best for something like this.
Can you cast the buckram while they still have it on? Or just-
No, because the buckram takes like 24 to 48 hours to dry and harden. So unless you're paying for their room and board and you want to spoon feed that person and go get your chamber pot for the next 48 hours while they stand there completely still, you're going to want to cast it off of that person's body. Yeah. Great questions, great questions.
So why don't they actually, I mean, there's a lot of process there, but
Oh, yes.
why don't they just kind of sell for societies, museums, what have you, inexpensive mannequins that would appropriately work?
Because I mean, they want to make money, and they're not going to sell an inexpensive mannequin because it's not going to give them the profit. They know that it is such a niche market that they can get away with that.
Okay.
And that's why also they're also driving people away from their business because people can't afford that. Even Genesee Country Village Museum or RMSC or Strong that have larger budgets than a house museum or historical societies, we have to cut corners and find ways of making these materials ourselves. And because it's such a niche professional market, there are limited people who know that skill. So that whole system sort of feeds off of itself. To create a system where there are very expensive professional mannequins and most people are making their own mannequin. Or just hanging things up on a padded hanger with perhaps like almost like a pillow in the shape of a person's body that is hanging from the hanger itself. That is a very cost-effective way that any person with the most basic sewing skills can do. You can take an old cotton pillowcase, because cotton is fine, it doesn't off-gas, wash it. You can take the pillowcase and essentially lay a dress or a garment over it and very carefully mark out where that dress, the edges of the dress on the pillowcase. Then you can sew in from that line and stuff it and put it hanging from a hanger. So you add a little bit more life and shape to that garment as it hangs. And that's useful both for storage because you're taking some of the weight off of the hanging weight off of the garment and you're sort of bringing that object to life.
So if you were a lot of historical societies don't have tons of textiles, nor necessarily do they go down that road.
Yeah, correct.
So probably for a smaller, you probably are better to use a archival box that you can put this stuff in, I'm presuming, with maybe some archival tissue paper around it?
Absolutely. So it really depends on what space you have, but if you have a very small clothing collection, and you have the ability to put it all horizontally, that's going to preserve it more than hanging it, even if it's
That's what I would
structurally
think,
sound.
yeah.
You don't want, so you don't need one object in one box. You can put more than one object in one box. You always put the heaviest thing on the bottom and you go lighter. I would say 3 to 4 wool or silk garments can fit in one box. If it's a bunch of linen and cotton, I would not recommend this, but you can really stack it in that box and it's gonna
And
be
separate
fine.
it with archival tissue paper,
Yes, you
right?
want acid-free tissue paper.
And then because there's probably a fair number, in this region, quilts.
Mm-hmm.
And so just periodically have a schedule for refolding them?
Yes, so quilts, unless you have, ideally for quilts and textiles, you want a gravity-free chamber where they're all open and just floating there. That does not exist on Earth. So you have to fold them to fit them into a box. Even at Colonial Williamsburg, they have flat file drawers that are like as wide, the drawer is as wide as this room, and you can open up and the whole quilt is just lying there open. Most people don't have the space and the money for that. And Colonial Williamsburg is their endowment was underpinned by like giants, industrialists like Carnegie's and the Rockefellers. We don't have that here in Macedon, unfortunately. So what you're absolutely right. You have to fold the quilt. So how do you fold a quilt? So first you want to fold it as little as possible, and you want to bolster and support that fold with what museums often call like a snake or like a worm. So what is that? It is a tube of this medical stockinette you see here, filled with cotton or wool, or even archival poly batting. You just make like a snake of it, and every time you fold it over, that fold has a long tube of that. It's like a long bolster cushion you're making in that fold. And those you can reuse them over and over and over again. Every 6 months, our policy at the museum was to unfold the quilts and take an assessment of them and then refold them in the opposite direction. Again, full with that fold cushioning every single fold, and trying to fold it as little number as possible. So
say cushion it. So if you folded a quilt,
Yep.
okay, you're just saying put something under that fold just to cushion it.
Yes, so let's say I have to put this bodice into a box and I have to fold the arms in like this.
Yeah.
Where that fold is, I'm putting a little cushion like that, right, like
I
that.
gotcha.
So it
Okay.
cushions like that. If you don't want to buy yards of archival, medical stockinette and bags of archival batting, that's another job for a pool noodle, and it works perfectly.
Any pool noodle you can buy, doesn't matter, they're all made the same?
They're all made the same. I have found that they don't off-gas, they don't, the color does not transfer, nothing's gonna eat it, it's not a food source for anything. So we use it for folds, storing, padding.
So you just go to the dollar store in
You
the
can.
beginning of summer.
I would say go at the end of summer, because they will jack up the price. Like the pool noodles coming out now are the most expensive they are in the year. So like buy a box of 60 in December, and you're set for a couple years. One thing you will need to do with the pool noodle, they often have stickers on them, and that sticker has an adhesive. So remove the sticker and use some like wiping alcohol to remove the adhesive left on the pool noodle. You can even cover the pool noodle with medical stockinette to just put one more layer of cotton if you're at all worried about that. And all of these, it's a lot of material, but none of it is expensive. It's really those acid-free containers, acid-free tissue, some pool noodles, some medical stockinette, and twill tape. Which is this tape right here. It's a cotton tape, it's woven in a twill weave so it doesn't warp when you pull on it. We use twill tape for all sorts of things, from tying up ribbons to putting little tabs on boxes. So if you have layers of things in a box, you don't have to reach your fingers around and like potentially abrade the fabric. You just pick up those little loops and you move it, kind of like someone in a hospital, you know. Or you can take that Tyvek fabric that you can buy at Lowe's, like a big roll of it, line the box, put that object in the box on top of the Tyvek, and you just fold the flaps of Tyvek over it. So when you want to take a large object out of a box, you don't have to grab the object and hold it. You just grab the corners of the Tyvek with someone on the other end, and you move it, like moving someone from one hospital bed to the next.
Do you use glue or something? What do you use to?
Yes, so we use hot glue, which is another, you can buy cheap hot glue from the dollar store, but you want to get the archival hot glue, because school hot glue, I guess I would say, does off-gas. Even though it off-gasses, most of the off-gassing occurs when you heat it and press it through the gun. But if you want to be doubly sure, you can buy slightly more expensive archival hot glue sticks.
Do you buy most of your,
We have the cold stuff now too.
do you buy most of your medical stockinette and your pool noodles just online?
Oh yeah, online. And you can, I mean, you can buy from like Accessible Archives or Gaylord or a few other archival places. You can also buy it on like eBay.
Right.
It's the same exact thing, but it's cheaper.
How do you tag your textiles?
Great question. So I'm going to make sure the textile or the object itself has a number, your accession number, as well as the mount or the hanger. So when it goes on exhibit and comes off, I don't want to mix up those hangers and mounts that we spent so much time making custom for that object. So I want to label them both with the same number so it goes right back to the thing that fits it perfectly. So how we do that with textiles is we will take, there's all sorts of twill tape. There's heavy twill tape like this for tying and for making tabs. And then there is, they might call it label twill tape or just label tape. It's the same thing, but the twill weave is much finer, so you can write on it with an archival marker. And those archival markers are called micron pens, M-I-C-R-O-N. You can get them in different thicknesses. The best thickness for label making is the 0.08 millimeter micron pen. And so you will take whatever accession number you have for that object, you'll write, bless you, you'll write on a little piece of the tape, and then you'll tuck the raw edges of that tape in like this, and then you'll just baste it, usually to the collar of the garment. You want it in a place that is easily findable, so you're not like messing, abrading, touching the object so much, searching for a tag. So I usually put it right in the inside neckline because there are multiple layers there. I'm not sewing it to one layer of fabric that you're damaging the fabric when you sew into it. So I put it where there are multiple layers of fabric. So it's not gonna rip out easily. I put it where it's visually prominent so I can find it quickly and not manipulate the object too much. And because it's on the inside of the neckline, when you display it, your guests are not going to see that number. You can put that number in the label, your museum label. And then that same number is going to appear on the mount. So this mount here, for this Quaker bonnet, I don't think it has a number yet. So it does?
It's number one.
It's number one. So I'm gonna put a twill label inside. Oh! I'm damaging your collection up here, goodness. And I believe, so I didn't know what the number was when Dave and I made this mount last summer, but you can see I did sew a little tag inside. So I can go in and write that number, and then I will write the same number on the label here on the mount. So when this goes on display, you can display it just like this and maybe drape some fabric around it so you don't see the label and these little tags. Or I can buy a display mount like this or a foam head and display that, but when it comes off exhibit, I know exactly what mount is going to fit it, and it's gonna fit it perfectly. Any other questions? Because I could go on and on and on about this, folks.
When you're assigning archival numbers,
Mm-hmm.
it seems like an obvious answer, but let's say I have the hat, I have a book, and I have an object. Would it be like T1 for this, textile 1, and B1 for book? Or?
That's a great question. So often, you receive donations and there's a variety of objects in that donation. So usually there is a tri-number system in museum accession numbers. The first number is a 4-digit number, which is the year that donation was given. So let's say you received a donation, that trunk, for instance, that has all those objects. What year did you receive it in?
2025.
Okay, so that first number is gonna be 2025. The next, and then there's gonna be a decimal point. Then there's a center number. That number refers to what donation that is in the year. Do you know offhand, like what, is that your 5th donation of 2025 or your 7th or your 3rd donation?
Well, I would say probably our 25th.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
great. That's a great number. So you're gonna, everything in that box, including the trunk, is going to start with 2025.25 because it's the 25th donation, and then the 3rd number is going to be what number in that box it happens to be. And you can make the trunk 2025.25.001 because that's the first object there that you're probably gonna process is the trunk. And every object within that lot 25 of year 2025, is going to have its own individual number at the end.
Do you use a system for your, I'm presuming you use some sort of a database or a system?
Yes, so you can use Excel and have that accession number on the left-hand side, and then like an object name, a description name, the year you think it was made, who donated it. Or you can use like Past Perfect. Past Perfect will have an accession number. We, for decades, used Past Perfect. 2 years ago, we switched to a new software system called Catalog It. And Catalog It is cheaper than Past Perfect. The customer service is impeccable, and they will transfer everything from Past Perfect into Catalog It. And I was so worried. I was like, they're gonna jumble everything up. You know, one category is gonna be moved to the next. We have 135,000 objects. If I could pause time and fix all these categories, it would take me 2 lifetimes to do that. So I was really worried, but it was impeccably transferred. And they have ongoing customer service with the most basic package, and it's free up until 50,000 objects. And then I think a year subscription is like $400, $500, which is a good chunk of change, but it is worth it for the amount of work they do to transfer from Past Perfect to Catalog It.
It's a web-based too, isn't it?
It is
So you can put
web-based.
your pictures on there as
Mhm.
well.
Pictures.
Past Perfect isn't, for smaller historical societies, because it's based on, you know, your accounting and revenue and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And expenses. But Past Perfect isn't, I mean, I'm looking at that, and it's not that expensive, I don't think.
It isn't, but I would say that Past Perfect has its pros, any software has its pros and cons. For today's need, I personally have found Catalog It to be a little bit more
User friendly.
user-friendly. It's visually more appealing on the website because ultimately you want your cataloging system to be useful for you, but also available to the public. So someone remotely can be like, I wonder what Macedon Historical Society has, and then they can do that and be like, I need to go visit and see more.
Catalog It, when did it come out?
I'm not sure. I do not know the answer to that, but within the past 10 years.
Okay.
And I will also say one advantage that Catalog It has is it has the app, and it looks exactly the same on your phone as your screen. So I don't have to get a digital camera and take a picture of something or my phone and then download the picture to my computer and then upload that picture to Catalog, to Past
Do you
Perfect.
find it really good?
Oh yes, oh yes. And I can take a picture right from my phone and instantly upload it to Catalog It. I love Catalog It, yes.
Would that be something we would link to our own website?
Yes, you should, because then, and when you do that, part of that package is the online public component to it. So you don't need the public to know the valuation of this donation or how much it cost you to buy it if it was a purchase rather than a donation, or you can decide which fields are public and not. Because some donors will say, you can take this, but I don't want people knowing that I gave it to you, or for whatever reason they have. Everyone has different reasons and different comfort levels. So I believe you can decide on Past Perfect as well what the public sees and what they can't. But that is a great advantage of any cataloging system, is having it be a resource for researchers, for students, people who just have a passive interest in history, and they can access it remotely. So someone in San Francisco can get interested and have access to what's happening right here in Macedon. Yes.
Does catalog it, provide any benefit to an organization for linking to them? Like a discount?
I mean, no, I think that's the point of their business, so they're not gonna give a discount for you accessing that, but for what they give you for the money you're paying, it in my view, in my experience, outweighs past perfect. And again, it's free from up until 50,000 objects to access it. If you want to transfer, like, you're gonna have to pay for that, but just to use it, you don't have to buy a subscription until you reach that 50,000 object
So
entry.
no annual fee?
No annual fee until you hit 50,000. But once you're above that, there is like a $400 annual fee.
If you have 50,000, you can probably.
And above, yes, and that $400 fee, that annual fee covers the transfer cost as well. So that's not an additional fee for your subscription.
Do you know off the top of your head, I'm just curious, I'm sure I can find it, but, where do they store all their information?
I believe,
Gas Perfect uses some kind of Amazon backup warehouse, but.
I'm not, I hate to give you such a vague, nebulous
It's
answer,
okay.
but it's like, it's cloud storage.
Yeah, it's
So
cloud storage.
you will always have that information in your system in case, like, the internet goes down. But like, someone won't be able to access that if there's no internet. So it's not like you give your information, your database to catalog it, and they have it. Like, you still physically have it on the hard drive of your computers, but it will free up some of your hard drive space too by storing it in the cloud. I'm a millennial, I should know how that works, but it all seems so crazy. I'm like, whatever that means.
Museum Association New York Manny Conference, they were at it, at one of the conferences, and they went into some detail, because I was checking it out, of the security of it, and they knew what they were doing, is all I could say.
Yeah,
I couldn't
yeah.
tell you exactly what it was, but it seemed pretty safe, and they were.
Now, one of the questions I get a lot, and actually you pose this to me, is like, how do you date clothing? How do you know if something is authentic or not? And if it is authentic, what time period it comes from? So the big question first would be like, is it authentic or is it costuming? So again, what's going to immediately train your eye is just working with a lot of originals. So when a costume, or even a very well done costume from like the early 20th century, and they're looking back at like 18th century clothing, because there's a lot of, if anyone is familiar with the Gilded Age, wealthy people loved fancy dress parties or dressing up in different time periods. And so there's a lot of antique historic textiles that are actually attempting to look 100 years even older, like especially around like the centennial. There's this whole wave, and you'll see it a lot this year with our 250th. There is all this wave of centennialism, where people in the 1870s are looking back at the 1770s and trying to replicate those elements of dress. So it's working with those originals that first and foremost is going to train your eye. Now, also being able to identify natural fibers from synthetic fibers, which really begins in like late 1920s and onward, that's going to be a very easy, completely cheap way of instantly knowing. So how do you train your eye with that? You can buy a $20 pocket microscope off eBay. And I can also come back and teach a class on fiber identification under a tabletop microscope. That's a great class. And you will know what these textiles look like. So this is a very quick lesson. Under this cheap little pocket microscope, any synthetic fiber is going to look like a completely smooth shaft. There aren't going to be any nicks on it. There aren't going to be any follicles or lines. Or even striations. It looks like a glass tube under a microscope. There's like that semi-transparent quality to it. Cotton is going to look like, this is a little vulgar, but it looks like a tapeworm. It looks like a flattened ribbon that is spiraled. Linen looks like a bamboo shaft. It has nodes, regular nodes down the shaft. Wool is hair. It's going to look like hair with a follicle. So if you've ever seen like a Tresemme shampoo commercial and it shows how the conditioner is smoothing the follicles in your hair, it looks just like that. Like a shaft with like little follicle line, like scales almost all over it. So wool and hair from all animals will have that texture. Silk will look like a very thin, perfect filament. So that is where you can confuse synthetic and silk, because those look the most similar. And it makes sense because when synthetic fibers come out in the early 20th century, they are attempting to like make a cheaper version of silk. So it's really those first three, linen, cotton, and wool, are very easy to identify with a cheapo tabletop eye microscope. But silks and synthetics are where you can confuse. So there's another way at that point that you can identify that, but it involves damaging the textile a bit. And it is a burn test. So you can go inside of an object. I would never recommend taking something from the outside. I'd go inside, find a piece of fabric from the selvage or from the the selvage edge of the seam, the extra fabric in the seam. Cut a little bit of it off, and you only want to do it once, so get your nose ready. If it is real silk, it's going to smell like burning hair, and it's going to self-extinguish. So you don't have to blow on it, you don't have to tap it out to put it out or get it wet. You will burn it, you will smell that telltale burning hair, burning skin smell, and it will ash up very quickly and will self-extinguish. If it is anything polyester or synthetic, it will burn and burn and burn, and it will turn into those black little balls, and it will keep burning until there's nothing left, and you will smell burning plastic, which is easily distinguishable from burning hair. And again, like wool, linen, cotton, silk, they all self-extinguish because as they burn, it creates an ash layer between the fuel of the fabric and the flame itself. And once that ash layer builds up and the flame can't reach the fuel of the textile, it will stop burning. Plastic will just keep burning and burning, and again, creates that like black sticky tar, and it balls up into those little droplets of like black plastic. So that is the best way if you're unsure if it's silk or synthetic. If you're able to, and if there's an extra piece inside, do a burn test. If you don't want to destroy the fabric, you can do a heat test. You can use a hot, steamless iron, and you'll look silly and don't burn your face, but you can get close and heat it and then very quickly smell the silk. If it smells like hair, it's silk. If it smells a little plasticky, it's synthetic. You may even burn it a bit with a hot iron if it is synthetic. So that's going to tell you what fiber you have, and you'll tell right off the bat, these are natural fibers, higher likelihood that it's vintage. The other way that you can date an object is by using all the visual media at our disposal, and that's completely free. So the 19th century, this is when mass production of visual communication and visual media starts to begin. So we are proliferating fashion plates all over the world. Even warring nations, there is a respect for fashion and textiles that we don't have today. Warring nations would meet at the border and exchange fashion plates, exchange textiles, because it's such a currency that you will overlook the fact that you're trying to kill each other to transfer that fashion and textile information. So you can look at fashion plates as a basis for what era of fashion you're looking at. What is the style? What is the silhouette? Clothing for women is much easier to date than men's clothing, because especially in the 19th century, women have a different silhouette every 10, or you could even argue every 5 years. So you can see a piece of fashion and be like, okay, I see that it has bell sleeves, the arm side is set down, and there's a very large skirt, probably the 1850s. Or there is, the front and the sides are flat, but there's a lot of gathering in the back. And the bodice is very sculpted and it goes over the hips, probably the 1880s. Or it has really large sleeves and a wide, shallow neckline, and the waist is up high, perhaps the 1830s. So, and that doesn't change based on that silhouette doesn't really change outside of different countries in the Western world. The color, the material, the level of decor might change, but that silhouette is going to be the same. So you can use things like fashion plates or even later in the 19th century photography to date your clothing collection. Really from like 1837 onward, we're photographing people, whether it's a daguerreotype, an ambrotype, a tintype, or a carte de visite, or a cabinet card. All of that visual media is going to train your eye when it comes to fashion and silhouettes. For menswear, it tends to be the jacket that's going to help you date it the most, the shape of the lapels, whether the lapels are high up under the neck or whether they splay out deeper, whether the coat is big and boxy like the 1860s or very structured and tailored like the 40s, the 50s, and the 70s. That it's really the jacket and hats for men that will help you date a man's ensemble. I'll also say menswear is the hardest to display. Because when women's wear, it's usually like one piece or two pieces, like a skirt and a bodice, or they're connected. So you mount it and you're like kind of done. With men's wear, it's very rare that you get a shirt, a pair of trousers, a waistcoat, and a jacket, all from the same man. So when you're putting these pieces together, like they're all men of different sizes, and you're trying to make it fit. So you will say all sorts of expletives when you're attempting to display menswear. But if there's one piece of menswear that's going to help you date a time period, or it's really that jacket. The jacket is the most structured object in menswear across time, really. Any other questions, folks? I wish I had a card to give you for Landmark. My cards have not been printed yet, or else I'd give it to you and you can ask me all sorts of questions beyond that, because as you can see, I have the gift of gab. So we've talked about types of textiles and their behavior, materials to store and exhibit objects, ways to cost effectively exhibit objects, and dating of objects. Any other areas that we tend to, where problems occur? I'm sort of racking my brain.
I have
Yes.
a question. I like that bonnet.
This one here.
Yeah,
Yes.
I think that might be my bonnet. Was it back there?
It was right back
Yeah.
there. Yes.
So, didn't do anything to it. It had been just in the attic in a hat box.
Yeah.
And I know with furniture, you're supposed to leave it alone, don't try and, so is that true, is it best just to leave it, or should one try and repair something like that?
I would say it is best to leave it. So you did the right thing. I'll say that. Because as we mentioned before, if you try to repair textiles, you're causing a little bit of damage by adding new fabric and sewing into it. Some people will use glue, and that's going to off-gas and chemically damage an object. Just handling objects damages them. So leaving them alone is best. You may have to do a little bit of reparative stitching if like the trim of something is hanging off, or if it's structurally not sound, you might put a patch of fabric inside of the object, or usually fabric garments are not just one ply. There's like a lining and the outer fabric. If there's a hole in those, you can gingerly put in a piece of fabric in between the layers and just structurally stabilize it. So ideally you don't want to touch anything, but that's in an ideal world where it is structurally sound without any improvement.
Because the contrast between the two bonnets is.
These two here.
Because that one is so lovely and fresh looking.
I will say, it runs the gamut. Like you can
Yeah.
find a really, really old bonnet that's in pristine condition. You can find a newer bonnet that's just shoved into a banker's box full of acid with all sorts of bonnets on top that they just crunch down, and you take it out and it's like strata of bonnets. So
Can you clean something like that?
bonnets are usually, especially this kind of bonnet, this is silk taffeta. Actually, it's silk rep, which is it's the same material. It's just a different weave than taffeta. So you could, if you want to clean it, I would say it would be a mechanical cleaning, in the sense that you are perhaps very carefully removing pieces of debris, or maybe even vibrating it a tiny bit to get sediment out, but you're not going to apply water or chemicals to something like this. A lot of bonnets, including this one, have like cardboard or even newspaper sometimes in the brim that was used to make them. So if you get it wet, it's not going to clean it. It's just going to damage it and weaken it. It's really keeping it in on a mount that's going to save it. Now you say this one is very tattered. This is pretty good. I've seen bonnets that are in worse condition, and you can see how different materials wear better over time than others. So the silk taffeta is, it's perfect. It's in perfect condition. The China silk lining on the inside, which is much finer, it is impossible for you to keep China silk over time. It just sheds and shatters, regardless of how well you keep it and store it. I can feel that the silk ribbons, they are a little crunchy, and that's not because it's been stored incorrectly. It's the black iron-based dye inside of this. So different dye lots can age differently. You often, and I'm surprised it hasn't happened with here, you will often get iron rot in things that are dyed black, because that iron reacts and rusts over time, and then it eats away at the fabric itself. So you can sometimes get, like, let's say tartan or plaid, and let's say like one of the stripes is black. If it's an iron, if it experiences iron rot, you may have holes in your fabric that match those lines perfectly in the grid.
Now I should roll those, right?
I would roll them, because they're a little crunchy. I wouldn't roll them tightly. I would roll them like this big,
Okay.
and they're out over just a piece of rolled up foam, or even a very thin pool noodle. If you can, sometimes you can find them thin or thicker. I don't know if you'll find it that thin, but you'll just want to roll it and then tie it loosely. Again, it's not tight around this ribbon. It's pretty loose, but that's going to keep it from tattering or moving in the wind.
Yeah.
Are they about the same age?
This bonnet is of a slightly older style. This one is mid-century. I would venture to say that they are both Quaker bonnets, because they look like Quaker plain dress to me. But this one would be an older Quaker bonnet, whereas this one has lost, not lost, it was made with a shorter bevelet or curtain behind, whereas the longer curtains are usually from older style bonnets.
Is it
Now,
nice?
because
That's the one you donated, right? Yeah.
Now, because Quaker has fossilized fashion, they could technically be from the same era. It's just probably this was worn by an older woman who was keeping an older style. And I believe you had a question.
You called it the China silk, the lighter weight inside.
Yes.
Obviously, that detracts from the appearance of it, and it would be hard to say that it's pretty. So, but it is.
Oh, the tattered effect of it? Yeah.
So what would you do to either stabilize it or remove it because it's so worn?
I would not remove it,
Okay.
because then when you remove something, you'd have to replace it, and it's like, and I'm forgetting the name of it, it's like that philosophical argument about a ship at sea, and it's in water, so you have to replace components of your ship, and after 7 years, is it the same ship? Because almost every piece has been replaced, or is it still the original ship? And that happens with objects too. So what I would do, and this is where you will have to spend a little bit of money, is I would buy a material called crepeline, and it is a incredibly fine grid in silk. and when you hold it up, when you put it up against fabric, it disappears because it's so fine and transparent. But you can use it to like cocoon like a scaffolding around something. So you're holding all the torn pieces that are sort of moving in the air against the object. You're stabilizing it, and it's not visually intrusive because it disappears.
So it would go over.
It would go. You reline it, but over that China silk lining. So you know you can.
How would you fasten that?
So you would, you know, you position the China silk so it's how it's supposed to be inside, and then you lay the crepeline over, and then I would take the edges of the raw edge of the crepeline, fold it over so you don't have like a raw frayed edge, and right where it folds over, I would very carefully baste it to the most likely the outer edge of this sturdier fabric. So again, it requires a steady hand,
Yeah.
probably a little not a microscope, a magnifying glass, and like to stabilize, you have to damage a little bit, which is what you're doing with that basting stitch. So crepeline is an expensive fabric. You can't cut corners with crepeline. If you're gonna use crepeline, it's gotta be the real thing. And anywhere you buy crepeline, it's gonna be like $30 a yard. But something like
Is it an archival material then you'd be?
it's an archival, it's a textile
So you
conservation
pull it from
material. So like you can buy crepeline off eBay, but like it may not be the best crepeline, it may not be silk, and it may be just slightly less expensive than the real thing. So like you might as well splurge on the real material.
And then where would I hire someone with a steady enough hand?
So that you can hire someone, or you can send it to. If you're gonna hire someone to do it, don't buy the crepeline because they have it.
Send it to some.
Send it to a fashion or textile conservator like Gwen Spicer in Albany. If she were to stabilize this, I mean, it could be like $2,500
Wow.
to stabilize one object. So it may be worth learning how to do that base
That might
stitching
stay in my head
yourself.
when I think about it.
Wow.
It's not as hard as we may think, and I will say the University of YouTube can teach you how to do it.
Yes.
So you can just type in crepeline stabilization, and they'll have all sorts of fancy words like couching and laid couching and brick couching, which are all stitching techniques to apply crepeline to an object. Because you can put it right on top of it, you can sandwich it in between layers, you can cut out little squares, and there are all sorts of different methods of using crepeline. But I would argue that unless you are really, really shaky or bad with a needle, most people can learn how to do this skill, and you can avoid the cost of a conservator. If it's a huge object, you may be able to do that, but I mean, it may take you 20 years to do it, but you could do it, whereas a conservator has all that equipment and paraphernalia to do it, and a team of people to undertake that.
I did want to mention, if you don't know, I'm Sandy Pagano. I'm the president of the Macedon Historical Society. We have a couple of our members here. The textiles that are back there in that area, probably only 4 of them belong to the Historical Society. The rest of them I borrowed from the Wayne County Museum because I wanted to put up a display, a textile display. And so they were very generous in letting me borrow some of their textiles. So, you know, if you want to do it, just look into Deb Hall, and I'm sure she'll help, you know, loan you things to, because I was getting bored with my stuff, so.
Now, if you were to like invest in some archival materials, I would be more than happy to come and, you know, teach a class, and we can make the mounts for the object in your collection that day.
Okay.
And then your team of people learn that skill, and your collection gets storage made for it. So like, that's a great way to like raise money and also build the skill set of a community and the awareness and appreciation for the collection. I could also come in and teach that fiber identification class with a microscope. There would be a cost to that because you have to buy, each person would have to, in the ticket price, you have to build in like $25 for the microscope. But then they learn that skill and they take that little microscope home with them, and they can identify the fabric. So I think you had a question, then you had a question.
And you may have said at this beginning, but we went to the wrong building, sorry.
That's
But
fine.
did you give your contact information information out in the beginning?
I did not, because I don't have a card yet, but I can give it to you verbally.
Okay.
So again, my name is Brandon Brooks, Brandon Brooks. Excuse me. And my email is bbrooks@landmarksociety.org. Excuse me. That's the quickest way to get a hold of me. You know, if you have a cabinet card, unless it's like 10 or more objects, send me pictures of things and I'll date them for you for free. Beyond like 10 objects, I might have to, that's gonna take more time. And I'm at the age where I'm saying, my time is not free anymore, so.
So you actually, I didn't even know if you gave your background, but you've obviously so you specialized in textiles.
Yes, so now I'm at the Landmark Society as their director of programs, but for 10 years I worked, 6 years I was curator of Genesee Country Village and Museum's textile and fashion collection, and 4 years before that I worked with the previous curator. So I have just over 10 years of hands-on experience with historic textiles, and that passion has lived on. So our Rochester Museum and Science Center, they are a history of natural history, like geology, dinosaurs, the environment. But they have a huge clothing collection in their basement that they do nothing with. So they are at the point where they're saying, we need to free up the space in our archive. So they're hiring me to come in, tell them what they have, where redundancies lie throughout the community, because I know what people have. I can be like, you have, 10 lingerie dresses and every other museum here has 20 of them. So like, keep the 2 best ones and sell the rest, or donate them to this site that collects fashion and clothing. So I'll come in, I'll tell them what they have, where redundancies lie, what are their all-star pieces that have historic provenance to this area of New York that they should keep at all costs, and what is structurally not sound that no museum would want because it shatters in a box, and what they can, to be vulgar, what they can donate and what they can sell.
That sounds like very useful information for them.
And I get to go in and see things. Like, that's one of the joys, is like people being like, come into our archive and tell us what we have, and I can just go in and look at people's things. I'm an object person, not an experience person. I will use my money to buy something that I can have, like a thing of beauty is a joy forever, versus an experience that I just remember. Yes?
So you're talking about putting on a class to do some of the things. I've taken one of the classes
Oh, you have. I
to
forgot.
build a hat mount, things along those lines. When it comes to artistic skills, I can't color in the lines. I don't know the right crayon to pick. I did not feel stupid at any point or incompetent the way you taught the class. So it was nice. Sometimes you go to something like that and the instructor has such a sense of arrogance about them that you regret showing up. I never felt that way whatsoever. So it was
It's
nice.
very kind of you to say.
None
I mean,
of it's true, but I
This
know
is
it's
this is not a highfalutin skill set. Anyone and everyone can learn this. I bet that every one of you already has these skills. It's just knowing how to use it for this particular need in an archival collection.
I felt like he was really happy that I knew how to do that now.
I am, because now people are gonna, all these clothing pieces are gonna, I'm gonna send you out into the world as little soldiers, and you're all gonna take care of the clothing.
Well, I've taken other classes where when I was finished, I felt like I'll never be as good as that person.
Oh.
Or something like that, and I didn't get that sense whatsoever.
I'm happy, because
You walked away with something.
a good teacher makes and empowers the person taking a course, and that.
Are you from the area?
I am. I grew up in Macedon on Nolan Road, so my parents are still there.
Yep.
And I went to New York to get my undergraduate in a completely different field. I was actually a mental health professional for 13 years, and then I moved into being a curator for 10 years. So,
Something
and
different.
now, yeah, completely different world.
That's how we talk.
But now I'm in I've gone back to graduate school again, to get a degree in, American history. So, I love school, I love reading, I'm a voracious reader, I love being a student, so,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm academically legitimizing myself. I will say that, you know, I was always told by people older than I was that experience is more than education, and I have very much learned that going back to grad school, because I hadn't been in school for over a decade, and when I went to school, I was writing things, and I thought, am I gonna go and all these like young kids are gonna be typing away and using AI and blah 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 blah, and I'm like, I'm not gonna like that, but it is not like that, and I quickly realized just how much experience outweighs books. I mean, the books legitimize me, and you know, and I love it. I am learning. I'm not just going there for a piece of paper and debt. But it has been very helpful having this experience, and I would argue that all of you have that interest and experience as well. And taking a class is just shoring that up and applying it.
Is this something that this group would like us to organize a work session?
That would be so much fun.
I
Okay.
think building a mannequin would be a lot of fun.
Yeah,
Okay.
that would be fun. It's
And
like more than
education.
one day, or like we start one week and then come back the next because of that drying time. But I cannot tell you how many people say, how do you build a mannequin? And because it's more than a one day's work, that makes it a little bit more difficult to teach that class, but it's not unteachable. So if you find a garment that you particularly want to mount, we can find a foam mannequin, we can carve the blank and then cast blanks from that mannequin, certainly.
Maybe we don't have to wrap ourselves in.
No. I mean, you're thin enough, you could be our model. I was thinking that earlier.
Dave could be the model for one of the male
For menswear, absolutely.
It's a little bit, Where are you from?
Don't give me that incredulous face. Get up, you're gonna model for us,
Oh,
Dave.
yeah, okay, great.
Doesn't your mom do a little modeling, Linda?
She will.
Bring her back into her heyday, you
Make a
know.
picture.
Put her modeling experience to work, so. And that reminds me, one thing you never want to do with historic textiles is wear them.
Uh-huh.
There are many times where I will, and of course I'm not saying this or chagrining visually to the person, but sometimes I'll as curator, I'd receive a donation and they'd say, oh, this is my great grandmother's dress from the 1860s, and I wore it to prom in the 1970s, and I'm just like, great, you know, did you sew it? Did you cut? She's like, oh, I just cut off like a little bit of the fabric to make it fit me, and I'm like, gosh, like why did you? Okay, like so it's
Guess what, you could
do
do
not
that.
wear historic textiles if you cannot. I say that while also saying in the same sentence, the only historic textiles I will wear are usually jackets or like coats of wool from like the 1940s and onward. You know, it's a wool coat, so it's probably survived quite well. And it's piece of an outer garment, so I'm protecting the wool from my body by all the layers of clothing underneath. I'm not like actively perspiring into that wool. And if you take it, I would also recommend not taking things to a cleaner, because they're going to use modern chemicals and modern dry cleaning techniques on an antique textile, which can damage it. They will swear to you, oh, it's gonna be fine. Oh, I know how to take care of this. Don't worry, we do this with grandma's wedding dress all the time. They are not using archival materials. The boxes are not acid-free. The forms they put inside of the bodice of many wedding dresses are plastic bust forms that are off-gassing. Many wedding dresses turn yellow or cream because of that. Or you'll get foxing marks, which are little, they look like rust marks that are sort of peppering the silk and the satin of wedding dresses. So when you go home today, if you have your wedding dress in one of those boxes, I dare you to open it up and see how yellow it has become. And it would be better hanging up in your closet or lying on the bed of a dark bedroom than it would be in that gosh darn box. Yes.
I think of one other question. I've had experience with a fabric, a fine wool.
Mm-hmm.
And some of those, I call it a mold, but I don't know what it is. It's really a whitish, looks like a powder that ought to flake off, but doesn't quite.
Yes.
Then it will appear on fabrics.
Mm-hmm.
And on a wool, I mean, I was told by someone in the museum world to use vinegar to lightly wipe that off, and that seemed to work, but is
Okay.
that a good way to treat?
Well, vinegar is acidic, so that
Right.
acid will hurt the fabric if you leave it on. So if
Right.
if it's like a linen or a
It's just a
cotton,
wipe it off.
wash it by hand.
No, this was wool.
If it's wool, then I would try to brush it off, mechanically move it,
Yeah.
and do that freezing method, because freezing will kill most molds
Okay.
and fungi as well. It sounds to me like it may have been, because like wool moths will have leave a weird powdery residue like that as well. It may be a mold or a fungus or a mildew.
It was such distinct brown spots.
Okay,
And
that
here,
sounds like
yeah.
more mildewy,
Yeah.
moldy to me. So that I would remove it. Maybe if it can't be washed like a wool, I would freeze it to neutralize the mold or the mildew, whatever it is. If it's a tiny spot on wool, you could use some lukewarm water and a little paintbrush and sort of paint it off, or like rinse the
Yeah.
spot off. You could use vinegar, that's what's killing the mildew, but you're gonna wanna get that out with water. Like if you're getting it wet with vinegar, you might as well get that spot wet with water afterward to remove the acid. Or you could even use like a baking soda and water paste to neutralize that acid, and then rinse it away if you wanna be doubly sure that the acid is not going to ruin anything. But really, if it's moldew, I'd use that freezing and thawing technique and then brush it away.
Okay.
So you
Does
just
anybody
remove the
ever-
acid altogether.
Does anybody
Yes.
ever permanently freeze stuff? I mean, just how they store it in a freezer.
Not really, because after a while, freezing is going to do some damage to the
Yeah.
fiber as well. I mean, when you freeze water, it expands.
Okay.
So if there's any moisture or if there's water in the chemical structure of that fiber, after a while frozen, it's going to expand and then it loses elasticity. So when it
Sense.
thaws, it just kind of shrinks and shatters, and then you'll see it flake off. And I'm sorry, I'm like rambling now, but I will also say, latter end of the 19th century, many of the silk taffetas are weighted silks, and they will shatter no matter what. So when silk comes out of a silkworm, it's a living organism, and it's producing a protein filament out, and it's coming out of its body. So its body creates a lubricant, so it passes out smoothly. And when silk, before silk is woven, you have to degum silk, or remove that lubricant from the silk filament. And when you do that, silk loses a significant portion of its weight. And silk is sold by the weight. So silk weavers realized, I have to degum this silk, but I'm losing a lot of weight, and therefore my profit margin is shrinking. So I am going to add weight to this silk filament by passing it through a liquid metal bath. And so the metal will adhere, those like alums and like metal salts will adhere to the silk filament and add weight to it. But if you look at it under that little pocket microscope, it literally looks like shrapnel inside of a woven structure. So even as they are making the clothing in the 19th century, the silk is starting to shatter. It's like the metal pieces are just ripping through it as you sew the fabric together, as it moves, as you wear it, as it abrades against itself as you're moving. And the adding metal shrapnel, essentially at a microscopic level, to that fabric, it's tearing it apart. So like 1880s, 90s, and right up to 1920, until those polyesters displaced silk, a lot of that silk from that era tends to shatter. So like the big puff sleeves of the 1890s, they tend to just be like they look like the inside of this bonnet, that they're just shattered, or the underarm is often shattered. Once in a while you'll find, I shouldn't say once in a while, sometimes you will find silk garments from that era that are not shattered, and that is because someone has spent money buying silk that was not weighted. They knew what was happening in the 19th century, that it was weighted, and that it, you know, the weighted silks with the metal dye like a dream. So they often are like very vibrant colors, which is attractive to the eye and the consumer. But they shatter so quickly, even within the lifespan of the wearer themselves. It's not time that is destroying the weighted fabric, it's mechanical movement. And many people argue this is one of the starts of fast fashion, the idea that clothing should not last, it should wear out, and you shouldn't be able to repair it. You have to buy a whole new garment, because it's irreparable. So at least weighted silks still decompose in the landfill. Nowadays, almost 80% of waste in landfills is clothing that is just there and not gonna rot away because it's made out of plastic.
Wow.
What should you do with your old clothes then? I always figure they're gonna.
I would say if you're able to upscale them, do that. If you're able to donate them, pursue that. If they are beyond donation or repair, make a quilt out of them. You know, turn them into a rack. Use them as many times as you can until there's no use left, and then, you know, burn it in your backyard. No, I wouldn't say that, because then you're releasing toxic gas. But I mean, use it as multi-use, like, and try to use it as for as many instances as possible before it ends up in the landfill. So, I mean.
Yeah.
And I don't mean this as an insult to any of us. I doubt anything that any of us are wearing right now is going to be in a museum collection 100 years from now. But they just don't make clothing the way they used to. So thank you all so much for joining me today. This is a great crowd that we had with some great questions, and I hope to see you all in the future for future talks.
Thank you very